Our friend Jeff Stulberg, he's an attorney. He practices out of San Luis Obispo. He joins us once a week, and he's here with us. If you have a personal injury case, if you've got yourself into a little bit of trouble and you need to speak to a defense attorney, he can help you there. If someone has done you wrong and you need to sue them, Jeff is an expert in that as well. Good to see you, buddy.
Good morning.
So, this Weinstein thing is pretty interesting. Jeff and I were talking about this yesterday, and I thought that he had taken off. I was listening to, I'm gonna throw him under the bus, Fox News, and their report said that he got on his private jet. Well, they were quoting TMZ. See, this is why, there's too many news sources that aren't credible. But they were quoting TMZ saying that he got on his jet and he was going to Europe for some sort of sexual addiction treatment. Well, come to find out, he got into some big throwdown with his daughter yesterday, some big fight that ended up out in the street, and I guess he tried to jump in some passerby's car to just leave the scene. Well, that didn't work out. So then he went back in the house. His daughter called 911 and said he was suicidal and depressed, and then she later quoted saying, no, it was just a family disturbance, and then eventually he left the house.
A lot of those in that household right now, this guy, as a result of what he did.
If you don't know what's going on, because maybe you don't pay attention, this guy is a major mogul in the Hollywood movie business. He's a huge producer, produces some of the biggest films, works with the biggest stars, and a lot of them are coming out. Names like Gwyneth Paltrow, names like
Angelina Jolie, there's a big one. I mean, there's just so many to get to.
Rose McGowan yesterday yelling at Ben Affleck on Twitter.
Models, they did an undercover sting on. Anyways, he's very inappropriate with women, and in some cases,
Rose McGowan got paid off $100,000 as part of a settlement to stay quiet about her run-ins.
Chump change to this guy, right?
With Harvey Weinstein.
He's worth millions, if not billions.
That's the first thing I want to talk to you about, Jeff. Okay.
Sure.
Is that something that's common in a sexual harassment / sexual assault situation where there'll be some kind of a settlement take place once the party that feels like it was wronged was brings it to light?
In the vast majority of cases where bad conduct is involved, something beyond mere negligence, like a car accident or something like that, whether it arises out of the employment situation or some interpersonal interaction, the settling party, the party paying the money, almost universally wants a confidentiality agreement as a result of that, so that you don't settle by your piece and then go write a book about it. Mm-hmm. There's limitations on that, though. For example, a confidentiality agreement will not prevent that person from being subpoenaed in another legal case where that situation is relevant. For example, let's say in Mr. Weinstein's case, if he was charged criminally with rape and the district attorney was trying to prove an MO, mm-hmm. He could go back and, or he or she, the prosecutor, could go back and subpoena people that they believed would have information relevant to having an identical situations. For example, Bill Cosby is a classic example of that. There was, in his situation, there was an MO over like 20 or 30 years of drugging women mm-hmm. and then having sex with them when they were incapacitated. And so when somebody is trying to establish that happened to them, well, I was there, and next thing I knew, it was the next day and I wasn't wearing my clothes. I don't remember. Well, the best way to establish what actually happened to them in that instance is to go back and talk to people or subpoena people who have been similarly treated in the past that do have a better recollection.
Does this sometimes happen in cases you do, like with a workers' comp type case where somebody is maybe let go or they leave a job after an injury and they want them to sign kind of a note saying that they won't talk about what happened, or they won't talk about what their contract was in some respects, but then later on it happens to somebody else and then they get subpoenaed to talk about it?
That doesn't happen that often, but it is very common. In employment law, for example, I do both sides. I represent some employers. I'm sort of their outside HR department, and I also represent individual employees against companies, obviously not that I represent. But it is almost universal in a settlement agreement in those types of cases to have a confidentiality non-disclosure agreement, if for no other reason than to not make it publicly known within the company so that other people might file similar suits.
Okay, so in the Weinstein case, I'm trying to think of the guy's name that He said his wife had been. They were talking about rape with this guy, and it was. It's the chef that travels all around the world. It's the writer,
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, and so if there is a case that comes out against Weinstein that is rape, and he has had other cases where they paid people off, like they did with Rose McGowan, they can still call her as a witness. Is that what you're saying?
They can subpoena her, and if she's ordered to testify by a judge, that settlement, the confidentiality provisions of that settlement agreement will not prevail.
But there's been no charges yet. That's the thing. Nobody has charged him with anything yet.
Right, but ever since there was all this discussion about him leaving the country, a la Roman Polanski style,
right?
They're talking about the FBI getting involved, and they may issue a hold on him so that he can't leave the country through
because obviously he's got the means. I mean, I said to my wife, I was like, "Can you believe that he left the country yesterday?" She's like, "Yeah, he's Harvey Weinstein. I mean, he's got the means to just jump on his very own plane and leave town." I want to circle back to Ben Affleck on this one, okay? Now, Rose McGowan said in the tweets that he knew about his indiscretions and that he said to her, quote, "Gosh darn it," and I'm censoring because he used a different term besides "gosh darn it." You could probably figure out what it is. He says, "Gosh darn it, I told him to stop doing that," when she referenced the sexual assault that was brought upon her. And then could he, because he knew of somebody's indiscretions, or anybody, there's got to be people that were close to Harvey Weinstein. There's been multiple reports coming out of both Miramax and the Weinstein Group that says that there were employees there that knew that this is how he acted with himself. Could any of them be brought into the fray on any pending lawsuits from the victims?
Well, like all cases, they're very fact specific, and so you can't just say yes or no. But for example, let's say an actress had an agent, and that agent was well aware of Harvey Weinstein's proclivities, and yet that agent sent her to an interview at his suite at the Bel Air Hotel, and she was subsequently assaulted. You could probably fashion a case against that agent for putting her in that position of peril.
Wow.
But not just being in the room when it happens, like Ben Affleck was. That's necessarily.
He wasn't
not
in the
enough.
room. She just told him.
She just told him about it. Okay.
Right, and you can. I mean, if you're, for example, if you bring somebody to a room and give them a bunch of drugs and leave them, and they end up being sexually assaulted, certainly that's that's an accessory if you could prove that they had some notion of what the person who was still in the room with the victim was going to do.
Wow.
What if I'm in a workplace and I see a manager do it to a fellow employee and I don't say anything about it?
That happens all the time because people are worried about their jobs.
Right. So I can't get sued for that.
You can't unless you are in a management position. So, for example, if you are, let's say you're assistant vice president of, let's just say you're the HR person at a company, and you see somebody else
that's your
assault
job.
one of your employees,
right?
And you don't do anything about it. Well, of course, you could be personally liable because you, as the HR manager, had a duty to them. That would be true almost for any executive position, too.
I have a friend who's an HR guy, and it's funny because, it's just like on The Office. Nobody likes Toby because nobody can be themselves around.
Yeah,
that's how it is with him.
You can't relax.
Nobody can be themselves around him because he's the HR guy. He's got to call into question pretty much everybody's actions
that aren't directly related to doing the job that they're being paid to do.
Yeah, we used to have a full-time HR person here, and they were on the other side of the building. There's a wall, and then there's our administrative side.
Right.
And it was like every time they came over, it was like, hey, whoa. Everybody go back into your studio.
Poor gal. She probably thought everybody was just talking about her all the time.
That's interesting. So he can leave. He can do whatever he wants at this point. Harvey Weinstein can do whatever he wants. There's no charges have been pressed.
If he's not under indictment and he's not being held as a material witness.
Right. he's been fired from his company. They want to remove his names. They're taking all of his stock options away. Whatever it is that they can do, they want to disassociate themselves.
Sure.
He's being tried in the media and by the public that way, but legally nothing has been done. And until it does, he can do whatever he wants.
Well, you can sue somebody civilly for $1 billion. It doesn't prevent them from traveling. But if they're charged criminally and they've been charged and they're out on bail, one of the conditions of bail frequently is surrender your passport.
Do you deal with these harassment cases from time to time?
I deal with the sexual harassment cases in the workplace all the time, both and sometimes they're same sex.
If you want to get a hold of Jeff, call 544-7693. That's 544-7693. You can also reach him online at stulberglaw.com.
That's what we were talking about yesterday. It seemed like out of the woodwork, there were all these stars, like big-time stars that were men that were saying, this whole thing kind of conjures up some bad memories of a time in the past. There was Rob Schneider, there was Terry Crews. They both came out and they said, if Terry Crews was as recent as a year ago, that he was groped by a executive at a company at a party that he was at.
Ed Asner's coming up in the news today. Apparently, he used to want to start working interviews with a kiss from female associates, and
that's probably not a wise idea.
Hillary,
you would advise if you were advising Ed Asner, you'd probably advise against that, right?
Right. A compulsory kiss is not the way to start a job interview.
Jeff and Jeremy in the morning.